Welcome to Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staton here. Jeff Simmons is going to join us very, very shortly. He's just having a few technical issues, but I thought I'd get us started since we're a few minutes late and get into it. And then as soon as Jeff is here, he will join us. It is absolutely roasting in the UK, by the way. So if I look really warm, then apologies for that. This time next week, by the way, I will be on the West Coast. I'll be back in my home from home in Vancouver, Canada. So I'm going to be spending a bit of time over in Vancouver next week, in fact, for a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that. But thought we'd jump on and talk a bit of Seahawks today. And Jeff will join us very, very shortly to do that. There's quite a few things to get into with training camp motoring on. The team have done a practice today without any fans there. But look, there seems to be some positive news, Quinn, from both the defense and the offense. It sounds like both sides of the ball have had better days than the other at various points during camp so far. It certainly sounds as if there is progress being made with the likes of trying to get DK Metcalf into a position where he can be a dominant receiver. We've heard some positive things about Ken Walker. Obviously, we've had the Julian Love extension. And I quite like the fact that Mike Macdonald's been pretty honest about the defense. And he's saying that there's still a ways to go for them to get to the point where they're feeling comfortable with things. And I suspect that when the season starts, the Seahawks will not be where they want to be defensively with Mike Macdonald. As we welcome Jeff in, he has had some technical issues, but he joins us now. How are you, Jeff?
I'm all right, man. We had people working on my roof this morning, and they knocked out the internet while they were leaving. So I was trying to scramble what was going on, and I just figured out it was unplugged. It was kind of sad. But I'm now sorry I'm a little late, but I'm ready to go.
Well, I was just saying that with the way that camp has gone so far, it sounds as if there have been good days for the defense, good days for the offense. Generally, things seem to be going along pretty smoothly so far. There's not been any injuries. We've seen other teams picking up injuries in camp so far, and touch wood, that's not me tempting any fate there before the preseason games have even begun. But, what is your take of the team right now based on what you're hearing about training camp, about where the team is, about where the strengths and the weaknesses are?
I think you nailed it the other day. I think you were writing it, but I just feel so refreshed following them. Like, my excitement's back. I'm excited to read the reports every day. And I think it was you said that, like, if Pete Carroll was back with Shane Waldron and they were kind of running the same thing back, like, it would be really hard for me just to see where the Rams and the 49ers are. But so it's been really encouraging to see where they are. I'm really excited to see kind of how the defense looks, how Ryan Grubb has looked. And we've had Brian from our show. He's been credentialed by the media. He's been down at practice every day. So he's been writing daily reports, which I've been getting good updates on. And I think the limitations of the team are pretty clear. I think the interior offensive line, Albert Breer was down there, didn't write the most exciting report about their interior offensive line. The linebacker question is still huge, but a lot of the positions that we were excited about, the cornerback room, the defensive line group, the receiver group, Kenneth Walker, it sounds like Gino's been having a really, really good camp. For a team that's kind of been that no man's land, 9-win purgatory, they have a unique amount of young players that could ascend. So for a team like that, they usually gets a first-year head coach, and it sounds like Ryan Grubb has really hit the ground running, which has been really good. And in Macdonald, it just seems like they're scratching the surface of what he can bring. I'm just getting really good vibes from Macdonald. I don't know if I'm reading this early, but he seems like one of the really good coaches. I think the decision to move on from Pete, and I think you noticed this, I think Curtis from your site noticed this, that Albert Breer or someone else, I think it was Rappaport, described it as welcomed. And so I've been wondering, like, how long has people been waiting for this? And me and you were kind of leading the drive of, like, they can't run this back. And I just come back to the point that I think they really nailed this hire, and the staff he's put together has really jumped off the page to me so far.
My two big takeaways at the moment, or at least thinking about where the Seahawks are, Jeff, have been pretty much those two things. One, just total and utter relief that they've made the change. I couldn't imagine going into training camp again, hearing the same words, thinking of the same people leading the offense and the defense, thinking about what was going to unfold, which was going to inevitably be by the end of the year, they were getting run all over and the defense wasn't very good. And the same kind of issues that we see on offense that we've been seeing with Shane Waldron and Pete Carroll. I couldn't do it anymore. And if it had got to sort of November and it was another one of those seasons, Jeff, I really would have been losing a lot of interest and a lot of faith. And as someone who stays up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to watch preseason games, for me to lose faith takes quite a lot. But I would have lost a lot of that interest, and I would have just been sat there going, "Look, do you know what? When you're ready to make a change, Seahawks, then get on with it, and you'll regain my interest in this team." It would have completely dissolved if I was having to sit through another Pete Carroll training camp right now. The fact that it's different and it's fresh and it's new. And do you know what? I can remember listening to a couple of podcasts, Jeff, around the time of Carroll's firing, because probably like you, I was listening to everything. I was listening to people who I knew were going to say things that I'd agree with. And I was listening to things that I knew people were going to say things that I totally disagreed with. But that's what I wanted to hear, everything in that sort of immediate aftermath of that. And people were saying on some podcasts, this better work out, otherwise you've got a lot to answer for. You know, you people who wanted Carroll gone have got this better be a good season next year. And I thought, nah, that's totally ridiculous. That's not the way to look at this. If Mike McDonald does not have an amazing first season as a head coach, and let's just include Ryan Grubb and Adam Dirty into this because that's their first seasons as coordinators as well, it will not matter to me. You've got to give them a bit of time to work this out. McDonald's already saying the defense it's coming along, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. It might take them half a season to get to where they ideally want to be, but that's the process of hiring a new staff and letting them work things out with this group, working out who they are, as Mike McDonald likes to put it. You have to have a bit of patience with this. And then the other thought that I had over the last couple of weeks is just how badly has John Schneider wanted somebody else to have a go with these draft picks and these signings that he's made. It just seems to me the fact that they brought back Marquise Blair was a shining example of, I think, him just saying, I've drafted players who I think are a lot better than the Carroll and co showed them to be with their coaching and their schemes and the direction. The fact they wanted to bring back Jamal Adams, they have brought back Blair, Darrell Taylor coming back on a $3 million contract. They're giving guys, or they're willing to give guys a second chance. So I think John Schneider thinks the last bunch just did not get anywhere close to the best out of. So I'm excited to see, because there are talented players on this team. There are good players. They just aren't great players. But are this coaching staff going to turn some of these good players into great players, Jeff?
And I think you hit a lot of the points, and me and you are really on the same page here, because player utilization was one of the things that McDonald really did well in Baltimore. I think that his creative scheme was really good, the way they confuse quarterbacks, but getting the most out of his players. And we saw Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney was trending to a level where he was trending. If he had one more bad year, he might have been out of the league. And he had a bad year in Tennessee, a bad year in Cleveland. They basically kicked him off the team at the end of the year. And he goes into Baltimore with no training camp, basically, and has the best year of his career. Kyle Van Noy was pulled off the street, essentially. He was kind of in that same path, but it didn't work out in a couple spots. The Chargers, and they had the best year of his career. And they had Kyle Hamilton, like, he was a really unique chess piece that he really turned into that level player. And Justin Matabuke is a guy who was kind of had a slow start to his career. I remember when he was drafted in that COVID year, he was a guy I did like for the Seahawks, but it took him really until McDonald got there for him to turn into a $25 million player. And that's what he did so well. And if you've watched the Seahawks, and me and you have talked about this for years now, some of the trades they've made and some of the highest priced acquisitions were not just like drop-in pieces. They were like unique chess pieces that this team seemingly had no plan to use. And their inability to maximize personnel has been an issue. Like, trying to make Jimmy Graham a blocking tight end is like laughably insane. And they had no plan for Jamal Adams. One year he's a deep safety. One year he's blitzing every time. Percy Harvin they knew how to run play with him, and that was it. What McDonald has done so well is the exact opposite. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they use a lot of these guys on defense. And, like, listen, there were flaws with the Seahawks defensive approach last year in terms of like their personnel. They didn't have the best defensive line, but with the talent they had and the investment they've made, there was no reason for them to be as bad as they were. They were 32nd in a lot of categories, and just watching them against good teams was painful. Like, they were a chore to watch defensively, other than like a little stretch in the middle of the season. There was no reason for them to be that bad. And Pete Carroll had a lot of strengths, but it seemed like he got lapped from a detailed scheme perspective. And, like, when was the last time you watched the Seahawks game, Rob, and you were like, the Seahawks really won because of that like schematic game plan? Like, I can't tell you, Pete was great at maximizing like the performance of players and getting everyone to build a team, which is really unique skills. But what happened was McVay and Shannon came in, and they are the detail, win with details kind of guys. Once those guys came into the division, the Seahawks always kind of felt behind the times. And so McDonald is really good in both those areas, player utilization and schematic presence. And it seems like their offensive coordinator has that potential as well. And that's where it's going to be interesting. And every time I've heard the national media talk lately, Ian Rappaport, Albert Breer was at camp the other day, John Middlecoff and Colin Coward, they were doing their podcast on Monday, and they were talking about this same thing that you just brought up. And it was interesting. Coward's been kind of down on the Seahawks this offseason. Out of nowhere the other day, he's like, I think the Seahawks might be good. And I might have been reading this wrong. And Middlecoff was saying his buddies in the league all think Schneider is a top 5 GM. They've all been wondering if they haven't been using their players properly. So the word is kind of spreading around the league. It's not just us. And like there's guys like Derek Hall and Boye Mafe. They have a lot of interesting players that we could see use a lot. How is Leonard Williams going to be used? He could have a really good year. But how is Devin Witherspoon going to be maximized? I don't think you can objectively say you watching the Seahawks the last 5 years or 6 years on defense and say like their coaching on defense has unlocked this player. Like other than like Red Bryant or Brandon Browner, like it's been a while since you've really thought that was a lot of that was Dan Quinn, to be honest. Dan Quinn was the one who moved Red Bryant. And as much as we like Pete, the thing that me and you had talked about, especially last year and years, just they were losing in the detail game. They were getting beaten. They were taking penalties. You wrote this for years. They're coming out the same year. Every year there's a new problem. They're just spending half the year trying to fix it. I bet you Schneider's been sitting there for a couple years now. Just he must be rolling on cloud 9 right now.
I really believe that. And, when you think back to when was the last time the Seahawks schematically defeated an opponent or got the upper hand on them? As you were saying that, Jeff, I was racking my brain trying to think of an example. And the only things that I could come up with were stuff like a random game. I think the Seahawks played the Bears in like week 3 of 2016. And they had a very clever kick return plan that beat the Bears. And the Bears were like a top 5 picking team that year. They were awful. But schematically in that situation, the Seahawks had found a way to get 7 cheap points out to the Bears. Those were the kind of examples that you would get from Carroll. You can split the Carroll era up, the different eras up into, and he made a major contribution towards all these things, having the biggest, baddest team in the NFL, thanks to Marshawn, Cam, and the Legion of Boom. And absolutely Carroll's environment got the very best out of a very aggressive, angry bunch of young men who were very, very talented. And he deserves an immense amount of credit for harnessing that environment for them to succeed. Then you have the Russell Wilson era. And again, Pete Carroll deserves credit for managing Russell Wilson because, in fairness to Russell, his career has not gone well since leaving Pete Carroll. But Wilson had a lot of success and the Seahawks won a lot of games after the LOB because of Russell Wilson. Yeah. So that's another reason why there was nothing schematic about that. And then when Wilson went, I think there were, the reason why they've won 18 games the last 2 years is because, and I go back to the thing we did with Brian and see Mike Spin move when we had the draft of the NFC West teams, and you had to break down all of the teams and pick a fantasy draft from the 4 different NFC West rosters. And actually, you look at the Seahawks team and you accept that there's not the blue chip stars that the Niners have, but there's still a decent chunk of talent there. So really, the talent that they have should get you to sort of 8, 9, 10 wins.
Yeah.
But it's how do you turn the talent you've got into good, from good to great? And that's the big thing. And I'm excited to see if details, as we're putting it here on this stream, is going to be the difference. Whether that will elevate, like you've said with the pass rushers, the talented younger guys that the Seahawks have got, combined with an exciting looking interior defensive line. They clearly like Julian Love. They've re-signed him. You've got some good young quarterbacks. I mean, I don't know if you saw Mike McDonald speaking yesterday, but he practically just stopped mid-sentence talking about Tariq Woolen and then paused for a good 3-4 seconds and went, I don't really want to say too much at this point because I don't want to go over the top. But, I think it's pretty obvious that we're very excited. And to me, that was like an answer that you could parse so much from. They are absolutely pumped up by the way that Tariq Woolen is playing in camp, which is good to hear because he had a horrible sophomore season. We want to see a bounce back there. So everything sounds very positive and encouraging. And I can't wait, Jeff. And I will go into every game this season anticipating there's a chance the Seahawks could lose and that they may well lose games they should win. But I also get the sense that it's going to be interesting every week to see how things are different, to see how things are evolving, to see which players are going to take the next step. And I actually think if the offense can avoid any kind of major regression here, why can't they win 10 games, Jeff? Maybe even 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, they certainly have the talent. Like, my mentality the whole offseason really has been, I don't think I'm going to – initially I went in just thinking I'm not going to use wins and losses to judge the team this year. I think you can tell just from the eye test where team is trajectory going. And I'm like with you. I think with the new coaching staff, there's so much newness, new OC, new DC, new first-time head coach, new schemes everywhere. And like when McDonald was in Baltimore, they had a game early in his tenure there where Miami just beat the brakes off them. And Miami was just going up and down the field. People were calling for McDonald's job. And that was with the Ravens team that had a lot of talent. And if that happens here, I think we all got to kind of keep our perspective. I don't think that will happen until people would lose their mind. But I think going in, I was starting to think like, okay, this is going to take a while. By the end of the year, I want to see them start to kind of take that step. But the more I've like started reading about camp, I'm like, maybe I'm misjudging this. Maybe they could be pretty good right now. And that seems to be like a lot of the people who've seen them kind of had the same read. Like, this team has a lot of talent. And my just impression was McDonald's defense is going to be complex. There's going to be a learning curve. And I figured Ryan Grubb was just going to have an adjustment period. But from what I've heard, Ryan Grubb has been really impressive in camp. And that's kind of taken me by surprise. I figured, and I don't know if that's because McDonald's put in a little vanilla on him, but we'll see when the lights really come on in the games. But if Gino's playing at the level that people have been saying in camp, and I think me and you see Gino very similar. I think me and you are in the rare middle of the whole Gino argument, which I don't think like anyone else is. I think you're either on one side or the other. Me and you are sort of in the same spot. But yeah, I think there's definitely a path for them to win 10, 11 games if the defense and the offensive schemes hit the ground running. There is talent, and I think you've nailed the Charles Cross evaluation and what we've seen the first 2 years. There's been a lot of excitement about him in the building. I need to see it. I don't believe in the training camp. And everyone was talking about how big he was in the offseason. We get there and I read your guys' report and they're like, he looks tiny. And I heard the same thing from someone I know who was down there. So I'm not bullish on Cross yet. I need to see it. I think your evaluation so far has proven to be very, very accurate. But if that happens and that does hit and Woolen hits, man, there is that. If you combine the talent on this team with the potential schematic advantages that they can get on both sides, like there's a clear path to them being pretty good right away.
Let's talk a bit about the offense. That is the thing. I think the offensive line is the thing that concerns me the most. And look, that's you and I agree on that, and pretty much every Seahawks fan, I think, will agree on that. Only the most optimistic Seahawks fan will be thinking this offensive line is in great shape at the minute. And more than just a talent thing, I think it's the fact that 4 of the 5 positions are going to feature a new starter this year. You know, you can't do that every year, and that's what the Seahawks do. Like, we've talked about this before. You cannot go into every season like they are picking a new center. Like, eventually you have to find a center that and look, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody on $20 million a year or a first round pick, but get a center and invest in them and have them start, even if they're just solid yet unspectacular. You have to have some consistency there, and they don't. And, you know, Charles Cross is the one returning starter. Hopefully Laken Tomlinson can do a job, in quotes. Hopefully they can work something out at center. I mean, at the minute, Anthony Bradford seems to be the leader in the clubhouse for right guard, when everyone, I think, expected Christian Haynes to get that job after being a 3rd-round pick. And then you have George Fant, who, if nothing else, will hopefully be a steady presence on the right tackle side. But, you know, who knows? He's a bit older now. So I don't know, Jeff. It seems to me like this is the optimistic way I'm thinking about this, and I'm going to sort of lean towards this until it's proven otherwise. That they've kind of accepted they can't fix everything in one off season. That they've spent a lot of money on the defensive line and fixing that, and they've kind of filled holes where they can. And what they've done with the offensive line is try to create a situation where they might be able to get through the year, where it's not a massive weekly headache for the team that's going to cost them a whole bunch of games. I'm not sure if they achieved that or not. I'm just trying to give a more positive slant on the fact that they didn't really do anything with the offensive line this year, and that maybe they think that next year that will be the year to make a major investment in this offensive line. I hope that's the case, Jeff, because it's been a sore point for Seahawks fans for a long time now. And until they fix that, I don't think they're ever going to realize their potential, because I just don't see a way that you're going to find the next Mahomes in the next year or two, which could maybe alleviate the need for a fantastic offensive line. I think they're going to have to build that offensive line. So I hope it happens. I hope this time next year we're doing a stream like this and saying, hey, what a massive improvement the offensive line is from 12 months ago.
Yeah, it's even the most optimistic person. It's hard to expect too much from this group. And yeah, Christian Haynes was a fifth-year player, and you were hoping that he would really hit the ground running. And sounds like he was getting good at left guard yesterday. He's got a lot of snaps there with Tomlinson got a rest day. But yeah, there's just not a lot. There's nothing you can hang your hat on right now. Charles Cross has been okay so far. Abe Lucas was their most exciting player 2 years ago. The reports on him have not. The one downside of camp so far has been we don't know when Lucas will be back. We're hoping, and it doesn't seem like the team knows. So they're very fortunate they signed George Fant. I think that was a really big signing. Their right tackle play last year was so bad it lost games alone. Like Jake Curran was so bad in that Bengals game. I think he gave up 9 straight pressures to Sam Hubbard at one point. They lost the game. Everyone blamed Geno, but that's what lost them the game. But yeah, you're hoping for something out of the guard position, and it's hard to see in practice when the pads aren't on, and it's something we'll have to judge. But there's been a lot of good chatter about Scott Huff. Apparently, he's been really, really good on details. He's been really good at coaching them a little bit differently. But again, the thing that worries me still is that Olu Oluwatimi, he was a guy you talked about center. It's been a recurring issue since they traded Max Unger. It does not sound like Oluwatimi has had a great camp. It sounds like he's going to be a functional player that's limited strength-wise. I think it's essentially what he was in college. He's going to be able to pass block. He'll be able to read the defense. He can be kind of what Evan Brown was last year, which was fine. But at some point, I really liked John Michael Schmitz last year, and I was watching Hard Knocks last week with the Giants, and they're talking internally like they think this guy is going to be a total stud. And he didn't grade that way in PFF last year at all. He had a tough year, but having a guy like that, I think what they need, and I think it was obviously pretty telling, they were sniffing around Connor Williams, and we don't know what's really happening there anymore. They gave a total non-answer to that the other day. But again, they don't have a lot of building blocks in this group. The veterans they do have, like Tomlinson, are pretty low upside. So you're hoping that the sum of the group can be better than the sum of its parts, one of those lines. But yeah, there's a lot on Scott Huff. They still have a long way to go. If Haynes isn't playing, it's hard to see where they even upgraded other than coaching. And it's the one thing, that I'm always hesitant about this team. I just don't think they prioritize this group. And you saw what the Rams did. And obviously they've thrown a lot of money at that position the last 2 years. And I think it's always a limitation of the Seahawks. It's hard to play that physical, tough brand when you're soft on the offensive line.
So let's pitch this scenario then. We've had one super chat, by the way. If you want to, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. If you keep them coming, we will get to those. If you have a question, if you want to say anything, if you want to join in the debate and have it up on the screen, send your super chats in. Or if you just want to support the channel, it's all really appreciated. But the Seahawks have got, I've got it up here on over the cap. The Seahawks have got about $10.1 million in effective cap space. They saved about $2 million this year on the Julian Love. I keep wanting to call him Jordan Love. They got the Julian Love cap hit this year because of the extension. So do they need to just go and get Connor Williams? And to a lot of people, Jeff, that will sound like an obvious answer is yes. But let's just sort of balance out the argument here. This is a player who isn't just coming off an injury. There was a lot of talk a few months ago that this could be a career-ending injury.
Yeah.
I remember at the draft, what year was it? 2019, when the Seahawks had not done anywhere near enough to address their pass rush. And the media and the fans, we were all pining for Ziggy Ansah, coming off a horrible injury. Get Ziggy Ansah in. He's the answer. Get him in. He's gonna solve a problem for the Seahawks. And he was a complete busted flush when he came in. He was useless.
Yeah.
So that, I'm not saying that could happen with Connor Williams, but there's always that possibility that could happen. You have to be wary about this. He's passed the physical, but passing a physical, okay, he's in a position where he can restart his career again. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean he'd be available week 1, week 6, week 10? We don't know. But do you just have to take a chance here and bring a guy in who has been graded amongst the better interior O-line prospects for a number of players for a number of years? But if you bring him in and he can't start right away, and you are going to have to start Olawale or Timmy or Harris or somebody else or whatever, what message does it send to them if you bring him in with the idea that, well, in week 6, you're going to lose your job probably? Because that's why I brought him in, because we don't believe you're any good. I mean, like there's lots of things to consider here. I think personally, I'm of the impression that if they think he can get out on the field within the first month of the season, then it's probably worth just taking that chance. Because if it works out, he might be prepared to say, okay, you showed a bit of faith in me. I'll show a bit of faith in you. You might be able to get a long-term building block there. He's only in his mid-20s. He's still got plenty of time left in his career if he can make a full recovery from the injury. But I also think it's important to look at everything and not just think, ooh, available offensive lineman, good PFF grades, get him in the door.
Yeah, and that, especially a man of that size coming off an ACL, is no easy task. And it wasn't just a clean injury, it was an ugly one. And like you said, they were talked that it might have been a career ender. So you never know how someone's going to come back. It takes them usually until that second year until they have the full confidence in their knee. And especially for an offensive lineman who's been really good on the move, you're just taking a total risk. They did pass his physical, which was planted in the media by his agent, which was very obvious. They were trying to negotiate, but I think you're right. I think we got to be a little hesitant to what you're getting. You're not getting the same guy that probably graded in the high 80s last year with Miami. It was probably Miami's best offensive lineman. You're getting a guy who's coming off an ACL that might not be able to play for the first little bit. So I was wondering, yeah, for sure, like what must Oluwatimi be thinking when that report comes out? And I think it was like day 1 of camp. It was like, oh, we had this guy in for a visit. They haven't started camp yet. So it's like, oh, that can't feel good. That's not like they're having a ton of confidence in him. But unfortunately, this is how the NFL works. If you're on the fringe starter level, they're always trying to replace you. So until Oluwatimi comes in and earns it, he right now looks like someone who would be a really, really good backup center. But I don't know. So the team does have a tricky spot where, like, you're not going to sign him and just put him on PUP. You're probably just going to wait it out. So at first I was wondering maybe they were going to use him at left guard, but they came out they're very, very clear. Like, they're looking at this guy as a center. So I don't know if they're just keeping their options open. I don't know if they just wanted more information, but it's not just a drop the guy in the Ziggy Ansah comparison is perfect because that guy looked like a complete shell of himself. And I was a complete victim of that. I was so excited when they had Ansah and Clowney. I'm like, this is going to be their best pass rushing duo in years. And it was brutal. And they replaced both those guys the next year, and the whole Clowney thing was a mess to the way they handled it so bad. So, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of questions there. It's not cut and dry. It's like you're getting the 90 PFF grade. That was Miami's best interior offensive lineman. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know when he can play. And it's not an easy situation for a young player like Oluwatimi to navigate through. So maybe they were trying to light a fire under him. I don't know what, but I'm going to be watching him really, really closely over the preseason games, and I hope we get to see him play. But from what people have said in camp, it sounds like a lot of the same from last year. So it's not super exciting. I was kind of hoping he would take that second-year jump, but hopefully I'm proven wrong on this one because they can't go through this song and dance every year and keep trying to rotate centers every year. They need stability. They need quality. And right now, we just haven't seen it since Max Unger left.
Super chat's coming from Noah. Great to have you back streaming, Rob. Finally feels like the rebuild has begun. Can't wait to see where this team is at in 2 years' time. Go Hawks. Says Noah. Thanks for that, Noah. Keep super chats coming in if you want to help support the channel. I want to talk a little bit about the quarterback position. And I've been kind of interested to see how the rookies from this year have been, how their camps have been reported, Jeff. So it certainly sounds like it's been a mixed bag from Bo Nix. Obviously, Michael Penix has kind of got a free run at this because Kirk Cousins is still getting back. But then I've seen JJ McCarthy. It's quite amusing, really, that these accounts aren't that they just basically look for reports from other people, and then I think they're absolutely awful. I blocked the Dov Kleiman account a few weeks ago and I've had enough. And NFL Rookie Watch will be the next one that gets blocked. That is an absolute horrendous one. But I saw that they were both reporting like the completely contradicting things this week. Like JJ McCarthy's on fire, and then the other one was saying he's just not looking good at all. And I find that interesting because this is kind of the place the Seahawks are in now. You look at players that they potentially could have moved up to get or could have drafted outright. They go somewhere else. How are they going to get on? We'll certainly continue to look at, the likes of Will Levis, for example, to see how he gets on as his career develops. Did they miss on that? Did they do the right thing? And we'll do that until they find a young quarterback who can be a starter for 10 plus years or whatever, because that's just the way that the NFL works. But I don't see I've not seen anything that's made me jealous at the moment, Jeff. And when I've done the sort of the big study on the quarterbacks for next year's class, and wrote 3,000 words on them, and I really don't see the obvious solution in the 2025 draft class. There's a lot of names because a lot of them didn't turn pro this year. They went back for NIL or for other reasons. And there isn't sort of like 3 or 4 players that I can say that's who the Seahawks can target. This is who, if you're a Seahawks fan and you're minded to watch college quarterbacks next year, keep an eye on this guy. I do think there are 1 or 2 with talent. I think Quinn Ewers has got natural talent, but he's got to stay healthy. He's got to be more consistent. He's lost all of his receivers and his top tight end and his left tackle this year. He's gone to the SEC. There's a lot of things there that are going to work against him. He's got Arch Manning breathing down his neck. You can run through him. Riley Leonard's gone to Notre Dame, but he's more of an athlete than a quarterback at this point. There's a concern to go with any sort of encouragement that you talk about these players. And I just think that it's a really difficult situation to be in as a team when you don't necessarily have a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, somebody like that who's an obvious sort of starter for a long time. But then the other thing that bothers me, Jeff, from an NFL fan, team who will hopefully get a quarterback soon that's young perspective, is looking at the money that sort of second and third tier, as I'd call them, quarterbacks are getting. Like, there's absolutely no way, if I was a Seahawks fan, I would want the Seahawks to pay as much as Miami's paying Tua Tagovailoa. And I know Miami fans who really like Tua Tagovailoa, and I know Miami fans who do not rate him. I can't believe that you would spend that much on the quarterback. The fear of not having Tua cannot force you into spending over $200 million on Tua Tagovailoa. But then I'd take it a stage further. Has Trevor Lawrence really earned his contract with the Jaguars? You're not paying for what he's shown. You're paying for what you hope he's going to become. And that's dangerous because he's at a crossroads in his career. I don't really have an issue with the Packers paying Jordan Love, but he's a one-season wonder at this point. And when the light was shining on him the brightest in the playoffs against the Niners, he couldn't get the job done. He made some mistakes late in that game. Jared Goff's on a big contract now. These are all the leading quarterbacks in terms of salary now. It's not Mahomes and in terms of average contract per year. It's these players that I've just listed. So we're now entering an era, Jeff, where it's not even the elites that get paid. It's anybody who is a living, breathing quarterback who is passable is getting a massive contract now. And I just find it a weird place to be in. And I wonder how it will impact the Seahawks. Everything that you're hearing from camp is extremely positive about Geno Smith. I still think from Geno Smith, and I'm right you with that. I'm in the middle with him. I think he's a good player. I think he's definitely the player for now. I don't think he's going to lead the Seahawks to a Super Bowl, and therefore I think one day you are going to have to probably draft somebody who can get there, but I don't see who that is. So therefore, you kind of go in year to year with it. That opinion often gets described as hating Geno Smith, by the way, even though if you either have to love the guy or you hate him, essentially. That's how it gets described these days. I think he's definitely the player for now, and I'd love nothing more for him to prove me wrong, have an amazing season, Jeff, and him sign a massive extension himself in the offseason. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I do wonder, like, how do you even gauge what he's worth now? Because if his cap hits 38 million next year, you could make an argument if he performs as well as Jared Goff, that could be a reasonably comparatively valuable contract. Yet at the same time, we're looking at like the Seahawks like 20 million, 26 million over the cap next year. And you think they've got to make a saving somewhere. And I've kind of just assumed that that's where the saving's going to come. But maybe not if he plays as well as expected. I just find it a very interesting position the Seahawks are in at this vitally important position.
Yeah, it's funny that when Tua and Love signed at $55 million, the average per year, or the annual per year, my first thought was like, wow, that Geno contract looks really good. Like Geno, obviously Tua's cap hit is a lot lower, and I think both teams structured the deals pretty differently. But if you just look at like the average per year, Geno's $30 million less than Tua, and I don't think they're that different as players. I think the Seahawks are really benefiting from that. But so then I was posed a question on a show I was doing with Brian on Saturday. He was like, well, what, like, if Geno plays well this year, like, what's he worth? Would you extend him now? And I was very against the idea of extending him now, but he was thinking they should extend him now before the quarterback market goes crazy again. But to me, like, it seems like teams, I don't know, are just fearful of making players earn it. Like, I would be totally okay if Geno has the great year that people think he can. I'd be fine with paying a little bit more if he proves he can play at that level. Like, I wouldn't have been in a rush to pay Trevor Lawrence or Tua or even Jordan Love. Jordan Love had 8 good games. I know he was holding out, and teams get terribly, like when Green Bay was holding out, they had to play like Sean Clifford at quarterback as the QB1, and they probably couldn't function in practice. But like, I don't know where this has gone away from. I know like the agents are in control, and it's really just like the market, like in real estate, it's just timing is everything. But like, I'm totally of the belief of just letting people earn it. If Geno has a great year, sure, I'm happy to pay him a little bit more. Like that was even the Julian Love contract, which turned out pretty fine once we saw the real details. I didn't really understand the rush for it. Like, if he has a great year, then pay him. I get it's good to be ahead of the curve sometimes, but with quarterbacks, it just seems like there's a rush, and there's still Purdy, and there's still Dak Prescott, and those guys might hit 60 million. So I don't know. It's all of a sudden, Geno, you're right. Next year at 39 million, it still does look like a bit of a bargain. But yeah, they're in this tricky spot, which is the idea of sort of purgatory. They're at like the high level of that, where there's no real solution. You're not going to find someone who's better than Geno right now. The next draft class does not look like, and they're probably going to end up somewhere between 12 and 20, probably most likely, but maybe higher, who knows? But you're probably not going to get a great quarterback option there. This year, it didn't seem like they were really close on anyone. They could have got up and jumped for McCarthy, but I don't know if that was in the cards for them. Will Levis is a guy, if some people think he's going to become a star, some people think he's a bust. It'll be really interesting to watch him, because that might be a total whiff if they took Derek Hall and Zach Charbonnet over, or not moving up to get. I think he went before both those guys actually, but they could have moved up, or even just taking Smith and Jigba over him would be a big whiff. But yeah, they're this close to Anthony Richardson. They could have moved up to 3 if they really, really wanted to, but they would have to pay for it. But yeah, they're in a really interesting spot, and I'm not sure what happens with Geno. My view is, yeah, if he plays really well, him at 39 million for another year, I'd be totally okay with that. But what Brian said to me, and now I'm wondering, if Geno plays well, they might be holding out for a lot more money. And I don't know what Geno's level would get to, because I don't know if he would have the kind of interest, and he wouldn't be a pending free agent in his age. But all of a sudden, the last year of his contract doesn't look so far-fetched anymore. And it says how well that I get John Schneider. I've been really hard on his contract. I think he absolutely nailed. And if you've watched Daniel Jones or watched Hard Knocks, that was the contract that Geno could have got if Seattle got bullied in that negotiation. It was the same year. He got 40 million, and they're already regretting the hell out of that deal. So I'm not really sure. It's a really tricky spot where I would be in wait and see mode. Just see what he does over the whole year. If it's the same as the last 2 years where there's 8 good games, 8 bad games, he doesn't play well enough against San Francisco, I think the idea of extending him would be rather pointless. And I think teams need to be more willing to be open to the idea of replacing that fringe mid-level quarterback. But teams are terrified of it. Look, when the Seahawks moved on from Russ, everyone thought they were going to suck for years. And they were probably pretty lucky that Geno was ready to go in their back pocket. But the Vikings just did it with Kirk Cousins. They didn't pay him $45 million coming off an Achilles. I think teams have to be more amenable to this idea.
I agree. I actually wrote an article last week discussing whether or not Geno Smith should be extended now or not, and I didn't publish it because I wasn't happy with the middle section of the article and felt like I was just saying things I'd already said quite a lot, and I didn't want to publish it. But I think the conclusion I came to is that it was not the best thing to do to try and extend him now, because and I think one of the main reasons why is that he had a very good season in 2022 before this market really blew up. And he reached free agency and re-signed with the Seahawks at a very team-friendly deal. And I just wonder how the league views Geno Smith. And look, whether it's right or wrong, there are perceptions about certain players and established thinking. Plus, Geno Smith will be 34 on the 10th of October. So he will be in his 35th year next year. Now, the likes of Jordan Love, who's just signed a massive extension, he turns 26 this year. Jared Goff, who signed a massive extension, will turn 30 this year. Tua Tagovailoa he turned 26 this year. Trevor Lawrence is 25 in October. So they're all considerably younger than Geno Smith. They were all first-round picks, and in Norbert Jordan Love's case, I'm getting them. That name is going to haunt me all year. The two guys called J Love, all of them were high first-round picks. Lawrence first overall, Tua fifth, Joe Burrow was first overall. He's got a big contract. Trevor Lawrence first overall. Love was late first, but they're all sort of first-round picks, recent first-round picks. There may be a little recency bias there, so. Even if Geno has a great year, Jeff, I almost think it's worth letting him see what the rest of the league thinks. Because I don't know whether, let's say he has a season which is comparable to the 2022, maybe with a little bit more consistency thrown in, but just to sort of measure things out, he's not quite as brilliant as he was maybe in the first 6 games. Let's just say he's a more consistent version of Geno Smith, but the numbers are maybe a little bit lower than 2022. If he then got to free agency, I think a lot of people would expect, as they did, by the way, in 2023, that he would then get a massive, massive contract, or that the Seahawks would use the franchise to target him. And as it happens, neither of those things happen. And I think if he has that kind of a season, you are still better off letting the league dictate to you what his value is, because I think that is when you will get best value on someone like Geno Smith. I think it's a great thought to think, well, let's just sign him now and hope that he will appreciate the backing and the consistency that he's going to provide for 2 or 3 years. And if you're looking at the draft and you're not seeing obvious solutions in the future, it'd be best to have him in an Alex Smith type role and not sort of pigeonhole yourself into needing to find a solution next off season or anything like that. Those are all great thoughts. I just think letting the league in this case for a quarterback who will be in his 35th year next year dictate to you what he's actually worth is the best thing. And if somebody goes, we'll have Geno Smith, we're going to pay him a large contract, let's say, I think you just go, okay, then we know what his value is now, and we make a call on that. We either pay him or we move on, and we'll make that decision. If he earns a $50 million a year contract next year, you either decide whether you want to pay that or not. And I suspect if the Seahawks go to him and say, well, we'll give you a little bit more to stay here, I think he'd probably show some loyalty there. But I also don't think paying him now necessarily, I don't think you're going to get a great deal with that. And if I was him, I'd be thinking, I'm probably better off just waiting to see what this offense is going to look like with Ryan Grubb. But I think it's a fascinating discussion, debate. The fact that Sam Howell is getting pretty negative reviews from camp is interesting, because I think a lot of people were hoping that, maybe he could be the guy. Well, right now he's fighting with PJ Walker to be the guy as the backup. So, we will see on that. And yeah, listen, I'm not I'm not that confident about the quarterbacks in college football. I think this is a weird draft that's coming up in 2025. I've watched a lot of the other positions as well. Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those years where it's quite hard to find a worthy number one overall pick, and there's not that obvious guy. So that's something for later in the year, obviously when college football begins. But I think it's going to be a strange year. We'll see what goes. It would benefit the Seahawks, Geno Smith, to play very well and to sort of buy them some time. But eventually, they're going to have to find a young quarterback, and whether that's this year, next year, the year after, or something like that, because Geno Smith's not getting any younger, they're going to have to find one. I'm not sure it's going to be easy to do, though. Maybe they will have to be aggressive at some point, Jeff. At the end of the day, Chiefs traded up for Mahomes, Bills traded up for Josh Allen. Bengals were just so bad that they picked first overall to get Burrow. So sometimes you do have to do that. A couple of super chats have come in. Peter says, have either of you picked any games yet to go to Seattle this year? Are you going to be able to make a trip to Seattle at some point, Jeff?
I was not planning on it at all, actually. I thought this was the year I kind of wanted to watch on TV. And one of the guys from our show had actually organized us. We're going to the season opener. So I am going to the Denver game, which I was actually kind of reluctant to, because it's one of my favorite weeks of the year, just watching the whole NFL come back. And as anyone who follows me or listens to me, I obviously love the Seahawks. It's the team I follow closely, but I do follow the rest of the league as well. I love watching the NFL. I love everything about it. I love the draft. So missing the first week is pretty tough, actually. I want to just kind of sit back and take it all in. And so I wasn't planning. I thought this was the year that they didn't have a lot of exciting road games that kind of jumped off the page to me. Like some of the one, Chicago was one I was interested. They're not playing there until December, which is the worst time. You don't want to go to Chicago in the peak of the winter. So this was actually not a great year. There's no New Orleans. There's no Tennessee. There's no some of the most exciting games on their schedule. Like there wasn't many I could pick out. So this was a rare year where the Buffalo border is pretty close to where I live, 2-hour drive. Buffalo's playing in Seattle. Miami's a place I would consider going. I just know a lot of people who have connections to Florida. Miami's in Seattle. It's just, and going to New England to see Jacoby Brissett or going to New York in December or November, that does not interest me in the least. So no, I for Seattle, the opener is the only game. But if you want to go to a game in Seattle, that Miami game seems like a fun one. And that might be just like a high-flying game. It's the September. The rain might not be bad. Me and Rob went to the Niners game on. That was probably the least fun Seahawks game I've ever watched live. I'd probably hold off and going to see the Niners until we see they can win. I think the Miami game would be the one that would be cool to go.
I mean that Niners game. I think that Niners game has actually changed my life because it gave me a new perspective. The Seahawks games that I've been to previously, Jeff, because it's a 5,000-mile trip to get to Seattle for me. If I went that distance and watched them lose, it used to sort of ruin the trip for me. Like I remember in 2014 going to the Cowboys game they lost in Seattle, and we were staying in Vancouver, and then we traveled over the border to go to Seattle for that game. And for the next 3 or 4 days, I could not get over the fact the Seahawks had lost that game. It really sort of ruined the trip. And when I went to Seattle last year and watched them just get de-pantsed by the Niners, it just didn't bother me at all. I was not in any way, shape, or I took it. Were you different?
No, I had the same reaction. Maybe it was my belief in the team has changed, but I used to take Seahawks losses really hard, especially the ones I'd fly across the country to go see. And I think it was just the way they just got beaten up. It was just almost easier to accept. It was just like, this team isn't very good and they're going nowhere. And I was kind of like you, where it didn't hit me the way if I had expected that Seahawks to win that game. I think the Seahawks were at a level where I think me and you had a pretty clear idea by that point what they were. And that kind of just accentuated. And if me and you were actually kind of worried that they started winning a lot of those late games after that. There was the Tennessee game. There was the Philly game where me and you were like, oh, are they going to convince themselves? And we were at the point where we weren't sure whether to cheer for or against them. It was kind of this weird feeling. And then if you weren't sure, that Pittsburgh game gave you all the evidence. And I think that's ultimately what forced ownership to make the decision. But I think I was at the point where I just kind of knew what they were at that point. I knew they were kind of okay. They weren't going anywhere. And then to see them get just kind of pantsed by and there really was that Rams game a couple weeks before that, where I remember you had a really like fiery article, and it was just they lost that game in an impressive level of ways, almost impressive how bad it was and how bad they pissed away that game. And that was the point where I'm just like, I can't get emotionally invested to that team anymore. I'm so done with this. I need something new. And yeah, I was the same way. So it's going to take a while for McDonald to see what my emotions are going to be like. I'm going in this year with almost no expectations of wins or losses. I can tell when something's changing. And like the end of 2011, when you watch the Seahawks play the Ravens or you watch them play the Eagles, and they were 7-9 that year, and they played the Niners, like who made it to the Super Bowl that year. You could see just from your eyes that these guys, there's something going on there. I think that's what I'm looking for this year. And if that hits the ground running, so I'd be a little hesitant to go to a game until I see more. I kind of got fortunate that I'm going for the opener. I think that's going to be really cool. But right now, I'd be a little hesitant to jump my feet in. I want to kind of see what we have here.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. I think with the Niners game, I'm with you on that. I'm interested to see, because by that point, I was very much of this era just needs to end. This isn't going anywhere. There was too many Niners fans in the stadium. You know, I just did not feel like a Seahawks game to me, a Seahawks experience that I was familiar with. And I loved being there. You know, anytime I get to go to Lumen Field is a treat for me because I'm so far away. But I was sort of thinking at halftime, man, you know, it's a warm hotel, you know, this is a pretty cold night. But I stuck it out to the end. And the fact that I was going to the Apple Cup a couple of days later kind of I started to think at least I've got that. But I think Adam's going to the Denver game as well, who does the streams with us. He's going to be there too. I don't know if I'm going to go. I mean, look, I was fully intending on going back. Then England got to the Euros final in Germany, and I spent an absolute fortune to get out to watch them lose to Spain. And to be honest, I do think the Niners game helped in that regard, because when England lost the final 3 years ago, I don't think I spoke to my wife for like two weeks after that. I was like, it affected me. Like I was in mourning for 2 weeks. And as soon as the game finished, I was texting my wife going, don't worry, I'm not as sad this time. Like I just went home. I met some friends like the next day and just kind of got on with it. And I kind of feel like maybe I've grown up at the age of 40. Like it's taken this long for me to sort of get over sports losses differently. But I can't resist live sport, Jeff. I just can't resist. If there's a chance to go to anything, I always end up taking it up and taking that chance. And I just know that if the Seahawks get off to like a good start this season, there'll be part of me thinking I could just get out there for that. I could just get out in November or December or something, or whenever it is, to go and see a game. And I must admit, I was looking at trips and how much it's going to cost, and you know, are the Huskies playing on it or any weekend around those games, so I can combine a college game with it? Are they playing a team that I actually want to see with some draft prospects in there? So I've already started laying the foundations for a trip, but I think my wife might kill me if, you know, I've done quite a lot in the last year. You know, I've done quite a lot.
I've had to do some massaging to be like, yeah, I'm going away the first week of September.
Well, I actually wondered whether or not the solution was to say, why don't we go on a family trip to New York? And then, you know, around Christmas time, and take the kids, and I'll just sneak off for the Jets game. Like, you know, I'll just go. But I did suggest that. And it is actually, believe it or not that expensive to get to New York from the UK around that time. It's not that bad. No, it's a lot more expensive to get to the other end of America. So it was something we discussed, but my wife said, if we're doing that, we should take the kids to the game. And I was like, I know my daughter will not be able to sit through this. Like she's not a patient person. So I don't know about that, but we talked about that as well. But there is something I like going to Seattle, Jeff. I like going there. I like everything about that. I'd stay in the same hotel. You know, I know people in Seattle that I know I will go and meet. In the last 12 months, I've got to know other people in Seattle that I'd love to meet in person and have a drink with. So part of me thinks I'd love to just go to Seattle again. But we'll see. So to answer that question, a really long-winded way of saying I've not made a decision yet on that. But hopefully. Albert says, pick 9 offensive linemen to make the team. I think he's asking us to pick 9 of the actual current roster, which is I'm going to have to look at it.
We got Cross, Tomlinson,
So
Oluwatimi.
Cross, Tomlinson, Oluwatimi, Haynes, Bradford, presumably, Fant. Harris
So
at the minute.
6. Yeah, probably
Harris is 7. So then he's asking for 2 more. Does Stone Forsyth make it just as a backup? Or do they move on from
Jarrell. Yeah.
Him or Jarrell, and then
McLendon Curtis, probably.
Yeah. And that's probably it, isn't it? I'm looking when you actually look at the list of offensive linemen, it's quite a sad experience, actually. You know, especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball and you see all of those names and you think, yep, there's some depth there. And then you look at the offensive lineman and you think, my word, there's not really one player that you'd go, at least we have him.
Nope.
It's not, and that's what they need. At least one of those and some serviceable other guys, or get 2 or 3 really good guys. It's been too long since the Seahawks had a really good offensive line. That has to change. Hopefully it will. But I like you, Jeff. I believe in the Huff and Grubb combo. I think we'll get this right if you give them the tools. And Hawks fan Matt Mann says, what do you think about the players maybe wearing the Guardian caps this season? Aesthetically, I think they're pretty hideous. Listen, I mean, look, Jeff, I'm all for player safety, but I kind of agree with Matt. They just look, it's almost like when they do Madden and they give the players tiny bodies and massive heads. Like when they're running around with those Guardian caps on. Like I just find it. I know they've said they've like found a way to put like a cover over them to make them look more like helmets. But I just can't imagine watching an NFL game with players wearing those massive helmets. I don't know. Look, I'm not an expert on helmet construction. I can't believe, Jeff, there's not been it's 2024. Think how much the world has changed in all of this time and the technology that continues to change. How can they not find a helmet that looks good, that does the job that these Guardian caps can do, just maybe a bit smaller?
You wonder about this stuff because the NFL is $1 billion business and they can't do some basic things. Like they just agreed this year to finally get rid of the chain gang. They're like testing it in the preseason. This is $1 billion business and they haven't been able to put a chip in the football to measure first downs. And they have these 2 70-year-old men running to the middle of the field. It's always kind of made me laugh that this is like every team's making like billions of dollars, but they haven't figured out like what tennis has done with the ball. And they haven't figured out how to, and I agree with Matt, like the helmets look terrible. So I've kind of bit my tongue on this opinion. I haven't really tweeted or said anything because I kind of agree. Like I know we're all for safety and it's probably easily the most important thing, but it looks kind of ridiculous. So yeah, maybe there's a business opportunity for you out there, Matt. And maybe you can kind of create a helmet with a company that maybe has them inside the helmet. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's for the NFL sometimes for just such a growing and impressive business. They just leave you scratching your head sometimes. Like I remember that before that COVID draft, like there was a report that like no one in the NFL could figure out how to use like Google Sheets to like, and they had to do like a trial error to like do that to figure out how to use a draft. And apparently everyone was freaking out. I remember Diana Rossini, this is where I kind of stopped liking her, was like kind of saying that people wanted to cancel the draft. And I was just like, this was ludicrous.
Well, listen, I think we've just said the quiet bit out loud because I nobody in the media, you know, you're never going to get a Schefter or a Rappaport or any of these types saying the Guardian caps look ridiculous because everybody is all in on the player safety, but they just do. They're too big. Like it's too big to be aesthetically comfortable with, as Matt said in his super chat. And listen, if a player, I wonder how players feel about it. You know, as sad as it is, I think aesthetics are a big thing for players as well. You know, I think the whole what Prime said: if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you play good, type of thing. And I think if you know, there are going to be some players who don't care. Probably some of the more mature players who are coming to the end and think I've got this far. You know, a bit of extra protection would be a good thing. But then what I would suggest to those players is maybe just try the Tyler Lockett way of doing things, which is before you get hit, you just sacrifice yourself and avoid the hit anyway, and jobs are good. But yeah, I find a way to make a normal sized helmet that is safer. And then there's all sorts of other things players use. The thing that they put on the back of the necks now, which kind of restricts the blood flow, and it kind of adds a layer of protection. I find it as someone who is terrified of needles and blood and stuff like that. You know, the idea of like blood providing an extra layer of padding in your head just makes me want to like throw up. But that is something that a lot of players do use. Now it's increasingly in college as well to get through it. But interesting. I did not expect to be talking about that today. But you know, Matt's kind of stumbled across a topic that's another topic that Jeff and I can agree on there. So thank you for all of your super chats, Jeff. It has been a pleasure to have your company. And good to get an hour in here. And well, you know, we're nearly there. I think there's a game tonight, is there, in the NFL?
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. It's tomorrow, isn't it?
Tomorrow we get the Hall of Fame game, even though no one plays in the preseason anymore. I used to love watching the preseason, that's how I would discover a lot of players. And Sean McVay started the trend where now no one plays, and now it's like become the whole league, and it's become a pretty awful product. But I'm still gonna watch it all. I know I'm going to be like, why am I watching PJ Walker against third string players? But I'm going to do it. So yeah, I'm excited to see some of the players. I imagine the Seahawks are going to be pretty vanilla in the preseason. But yeah, there's a game tomorrow. We're coming back. I already started looking at like my fantasy football draft. Football's like, as soon as camp just turned, like I was kind of off Twitter for a bit, like during the summer. I was kind of in a good peaceful spot. And as soon as camp started and there's daily like content to look at nonstop, I've just been like completely addicted again. It's been really fun to get back into it.
Yeah, I'm one of this reflects badly on me, but when I was in France last year and I sat down to watch one of these preseason games, I think they were playing Green Bay or somebody, and I realized that my subscription to the NFL Game Pass did not allow. There was a new company took it over, that I was not able to watch the game in France. I was really pissed off. And I had, you know, what a sad act, you know, to be really annoyed on a family holiday that I couldn't watch a bloody preseason game. You know, I am going to be on vacation when Seattle's first preseason game is. I'm hoping, though, that being on the West Coast and in Vancouver, that it might just be on the TV, or that I might be able to find a sports bar with it on. And we'll be able to enjoy that. But looking forward to it. Looking forward to football being back. Really looking forward to week one. It can't get here. As soon as the Euros finished, I was like, right, give me some NFL. Let's get on with the NFL now. Let's move it forward a month. Let's get on with it. Let's get some college football going. So very much looking forward to that. Jeff, look forward to us talking about it again in the future. Big thank you to Jeff. Big thank you to everybody who sent a super chat in today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment in the comment section, even if you joined in on the live chat, because it will help with the algorithm. Until next time, bye for now.